Cheers, guys. Epics 911. Welcome to the Elitist Geek VR news for Thursday, December 22nd, 2016. Let's jump right into VR, guys, and start with Epics 911 TouchWatch 2016. I'll throw up a map. Guys, we have moved out of the state of Kentucky. We are now in Illinois, specifically Hodgkins, Illinois, which is about 20-odd kilometers outside southwest of Chicago. In my imagination, this is where their international sort facility is. And it's going to cross the border tonight. If you have evidence to the contrary, please kindly shut up and don't post that in the comment section. Keep my fantasy and my imagination alive. It's a nice place. And like I said, it crosses into Canada tonight, according to that place, and gets inside these grubby mitts within a couple of more days. So I'm hoping next week, but it is not looking like Gaming Friday is a possibility. Probably their estimate of Thursday next week, but that's okay. All right. You probably notice I haven't answered any comments for the last couple of days because I've been working on the honey-do list super quick. I know it has nothing to do with VR. Well, it does because it prevents stuff VR-wise from getting uploaded. But gone are the horrible garbage bag and tinfoil window drapes replaced with actual blinds. So completely overhauled the man cave as well as items in the rest of the house that my wife wanted done. So yeah, now I can relax in here knowing it looks a hell of a lot better. And the videos are coming. Just pretty much ignore my horribly optimistic time estimates. I'm an IT guy, and our estimates for time are usually crap. All right, let's talk about the Unspoken. That's the Oculus Touch game using hand gestures to cast spells. Apparently, it was originally intended to be an open-world game where you played the role of an urban sorcerer combating underground spellcasters, and the game was called Wizards of New York. It kind of makes me think of Wizards of the Coast, the Magic the Gathering guys, but anyways, it didn't become that. It became the Unspoken. So very cool, little bit of history on that game. I mention that only because I hope to be playing it next week, Thursday. All right, news-wise, let's talk about the Voices of VR podcast. I've mentioned this before. Ken Bai on RoadtoVR, his amazing podcast, which I usually listen to on my commutes into work. Today, he interviewed Felix and Paul Studios. Now, Felix and Paul, a couple of buddies who started this company to deliver 360-degree content with a requirement to make the experience as if we, the viewers, were actually participants. And that simple requirement has basically guided all their actions, all their R&D, all their experimentation. Things like long, slow cuts, camera height, stereoscopic effects within the near field, better dynamic range, control over the frame rate, all those things factor into that. And put simply, apparently, and this is the claim in the podcast by Ken, who's seen their work, they do 360 like it should be done. So they got my interest and curiosity definitely piqued. What they've worked on already, a LeBron James preseason training video documentary called Jurassic World, and a 40-minute scripted comedy that's called Mayubi, M-I-Y-U-B-I, that is destined for Sundance 2017, the film festival. So very cool. Next up, interesting story. This one from RoadtoVR about an Australian startup company called IMR. They are building a wireless video system with 4K per eye specs in mind. Let's talk about these guys. So they're called Immersive Robotics, and as I mentioned, they are an Australian homegrown company. And what I love about the beginning of this article is the credit that they give the mobile phone industry. And we don't think about that often. But if you think about it, as they correctly point out, had it not been for the Android iPhone wars, you could argue when Steve Jobs famously showed off that first iPhone, we may not be using VR sets today. It's because of the phone revolution, the mobile phone revolution, that the screen technology, the integrated components, the IMU components, all of that was basically VR friendly and allowed the VR second revolution to take place, where we weren't dealing with crappy VGA or SVGA or, just horrible graphics. That's very cool and a really good point. Now, let's talk about their technology. So they claim 2 to 3 millisecond latency at worst, with minimal compromises to image quality, working over, and this is the kicker, existing 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, which I believe is 802.11 AC. That's the key ingredient. They're working towards compatibility with 60, the new kind of faster standard that requires like the unobstructed point-to-point. That's what TPCAST uses. So it's really interesting that these guys are using existing 5 gigahertz with the same latency claims. They are using a Vive to test with, but ultimately say they're going to work across the board for any PC device, whether it's OS VR, Rift, Vive, it won't matter. And they say it's possible using a proprietary video compression algorithm. They built it from the ground up, and it would compress data to acceptable rates for the current 5 gigahertz. And they claim, and I'll read their statement, they are able to plug into an existing Vive and compress its data down by around 95% with less than 1 millisecond additional latency. They call their system Mach 2K, and it's basically a battery-powered receiving box small enough to be worn on the belt, and I'll show a rendered image that was on the website for the device. It's attached to a USB, audio, and HDMI transmission device attached to the PC, which beams native resolution, at the 2160 by 1200 at 90 hertz to the target VR headset. Again, currently a Vive, but built to those same specs with 4K in mind. So ultimately, that makes it super scalable for today and tomorrow, unlike possibly the TPCAST. Although you'd like to think if it's running at 60, that one would be able to handle 4K as well. So be curious, but there's a lot of specs here. I'm not going to bother going into the specs. You can go to the website, check those out. Pretty standard stuff, the refresh rate, screen, etc. That was the big stick out, the 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. Next news story, conveniently enough, TPCAST. Bit of a funny exchange between Alvin Graylin, who we know is the regional Chinese president of HTC, and somebody else on Twitter called Alex Bowles. And basically it started when Alvin announced there would be a second round of pre-orders for China only. You'll recall, or maybe you won't, but in the first round, again, only for China, the pre-order sold out within 18 minutes. So Alex tweeted him back and said, dude, you're killing us with this China first policy thing. And Alvin replied, hey, get friends in China to help make orders, with a winky smiley face. I thought that was funny because what's the likelihood of that? I suppose you could though, but even then, it's one of those things. 18 minutes, you can't hit refresh fast enough to probably get in on the pre-order. So hopefully that opens up, much larger than a China-only pre-order. The larger 5-hour battery kit selling for roughly $220 US. Next up, Steam has started their winter sale, and guys, there are some wicked deals on the Steam sale. I'm going to mention a few of them that are VR specific. Dirt Rally, 60% off. If you like sim-based racing games and you want a decent one in VR, Dirt Rally, fantastic. I believe it's Rift and Vive for that one. I should have specified that here. Onward, 20% off. We know, actually haven't seen any accounts of Onward working with the Touch, but for sure with the Vive, 20% off. Raw data, 20% off. And this one, just amazing, 67% off for Project Cars, basically selling under $10 US. Easily my favorite VR simulation style racing game. would-be project cars. So check that out if you're looking for a good one. Under 10, you can't go wrong. Next news story, Amazon hires former Tribeca director to work on VR content. So they hired a lady by the name of Miss Terranova to work for their Amazon Prime streaming service in the hopes that she's going to be able to bring content to that service. You got to remember, a lot of the competitors already have that in place. Next news story, Neurable raises $2 million in further funding, as well as has a finished SDK for what they're calling a brain-powered input slated for 2017. And I love this statement of theirs. So this is from Michael Thompson, who's the VP of Business Development for Neurable. Specifically, Neurable enables users to open applications, scroll menus, select options, or even type using only their brain. It is an extremely effective solution for environments where other methods of control, such as controllers, hand gestures, or voice commands, are not practical. The tech could also be beneficial for people that aren't physically capable of utilizing those types of controls as well. First thing that comes to mind, people who are paralyzed from the neck down, quadriplegic. Fantastic solution for them for controlling a game. I remember when Christopher Reeve was alive, and he was an actor, I believe 2004 he passed away. He had a horse riding accident 10 years prior in 1994, something like that, and broke his neck, lost the use of his legs and his arms, and used basically a blowing apparatus to move around. So this would be just, I'm sure he'd be amazed at this type of technology. So very, very cool. And again, that's called Neurable. Link below. Next and last story. This one makes the statement that VR can leave you with an existential hangover. And they interview a couple of people. This is an article on theatlantic.com. I've got a different take on it, and I'll explain at the end. Not to say they're not right. I just think there may be other reasons for it. One of the people they talk to is Tobias Van Schneider. And he's an artist, he's really into tilt brush, loves the application, says he spends hours in it. He says, what stays when I leave the game is a strange feeling of sadness and disappointment, lingering effects. When participating in the real world, usually on the same day, the sky seems less colorful and it just feels like I'm missing the magic. I feel deeply disturbed and often end up just sitting there staring at the wall. Now, a few days ago, because in the article they say, and this is according to a clinical psychology researcher, Frederick Ardema, that it's derealization, depersonalization, which is DPDR. I think it may be as simple as just being addicted and going through withdrawal. I talked a few weeks ago about the natural dopamine response for pleasure, that pleasure signal in humans. You know, runners, it's called the runner's high. There's all kinds of ways. Video games are huge on that. I remember when I was into EQ and World of Warcraft, that's exactly what I had happen when I wasn't playing. It's as simple as being in withdrawal. It's the dopamine is not doing the drip in your brain. So yes, they're probably right, but let's not forget that important aspect. That's the news for today, guys. As always, cheers, and definitely catch you on the VR flip side.